Shopping around for static site generators, they're all the rave lately, but a lot of them use technology stacks that maybe just aren't that familiar. How does GatsbyJS stack up? Keep watching to find out. GatsbyJS is a JavaScript run and built site generator. What's unique about Gatsby is that it uses React and GraphQL under the covers. This brings some interesting and flexible architecture to Gatsby. For example, because of the GraphQL use, your data sources for static sites can be just about anything. A CMS like a WordPress, or Joomla, anything that has a REST API to it, a proprietary data feed, Markdown, an S3 bucket, just about anything you can imagine because of the GraphQL layer. Which I realize sounds kind of funny that a static site can have dynamic data or dynamic data source, but I found myself in several situations in times past where I've needed to tap into some dynamic data. So this is a really cool approach. Because of the use of Webpack and React, one of the things you get out of the box is a progressive web app. What that means, for one example, is you get data splitting. Data splitting means when you visit a page, only the resources for that page are loaded. Versus another approach, like what's very typical for other static generators and also just single web pages in general, where everything for the entire site is loaded at once, whether the user ever needs it or not. Of course, since it's built in React, Gatsby can take advantage of really the whole React community in plugins and libraries, which is massive. But apart from that, Gatsby has its own plugin community as well, a whole list of plugins. For example, React's Style Components library, the Prism.js, integrations such as Drupal or MongoDB, Markdown and YAML transformers, and a whole lot more. Deployment options are what you would expect. Run a command, it compiles all your files and source files, you get a static folder from that, and from there you can go and deploy it to an AWS S3 bucket or to GitHub Pages or even a service like Surge to your own server. I had a chance to play with GatsbyJS for several hours recently, and for the most part the experience was pretty good. You can check out that experience down below. There's a live stream link. Click on it, check out the whole, I don't know, it's like an hour and a half, 2 hour experience. Installation was, as expected, pretty straightforward for these types of things nowadays. Run an npm command to get the CLI, run something to generate your project, and then npm run dev or run build, I don't remember what it was. But very straightforward. And if you were just wanting to start writing pages in React, you can write your pages in React components and you're off to the races. If you wanted to use Gatsby with something specific like TypeScript or the blog articles from YAML files, you can do that, and Gatsby has several starter kits that get you to that point. I, however, opted not to use those because I wanted to see what the experience was just using vanilla Gatsby and then implementing the plugins like the Markdown transformer myself. I was able to get going pretty quick, but sometimes I was hampered by not fully understanding what was going on by the magic that wasn't really documented. For example, you can express a GraphQL query in the same file where you have a page, but if you export that GraphQL query, it shows up as a property, a data property in your component. Well, I didn't see it specifically called out that that's what you do. It was just kind of magic that I saw from the different examples and starter kits. So I didn't see it in the documentation. It'd be nice to actually understand what's going on there without having to dive into the code. If you watch the live stream, you'll laugh at the fact that I struggled a little bit with the Gatsby CLI, but it was all my fault. I forgot to update it. I installed it several weeks before I did the live stream, and when I went to go do the live stream and I started building things, I was running into some Babel compile time errors because it was missing some plugins that the newer CLI, I guess, had packed in with it. So that was my fault, but it did cost me some debug time. The ability to have a layout for your pages that is kind of templatizing it, where you separate your layout from your actual blog posts. It's nice, it's expected with this type of tool, but it's nice. The only thing I couldn't figure out is how do I have different layouts for different pages? That wasn't apparent to me, and I still can't figure out how to do that yet. One important thing to point out is that the author of GatsbyJS mentioned recently on Twitter that he is going full-time and working on GatsbyJS. So that's really cool, because not only does it have a pretty decent community, it seems, built around it, but then the author of the library is actually going to be working on it. So that's great news for everybody. GatsbyJS is turning out to be one of my favorite site generators. Easy to use, easy to set up, and most important, at least from a developer perspective, is that it's familiar because of React and GraphQL. Speaking of GraphQL and React, if you're familiar with those and you're looking for a site generator, I kind of think it's a no-brainer to use this. However, if you're wanting to build something that maybe less savvy, technical savvy people can use or build or whatever, there are other static site generators that make it easier for those less technical people. That doesn't mean you can't use GatsbyJS for it. You can still, again, plug into a data source like WordPress or Joomla or Contentful or your own custom MongoDB database with some things. You can still plug into that, but Gatsby doesn't fully have a non-technical view, at least right at this time. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the community and what they do with it. GatsbyJS might be for static sites, but guess what? This channel isn't static. So make sure you click the subscribe button below and stay up to date with all our top tech videos. Thanks for watching.